jibber jabber chit chat in here from those experiences that I can pull up dialogue from them 10 years down the road. It doesn't go away. And
Yeah.
that's kind of a weird thing too, right? It's like I got these little, filing cabinets somewhere in here that are storing this information. And I may not remember it verbatim, but I certainly am able to recall it. But I'm not sure how, with yourself, like when you've been on a investigation, if you've ever had an experience where you fully believe that they're 100% aware that they're not in their own timeline when they passed, have you ever had anything like that?
Not to say 100%. No, as I mentioned, the little girl Sarah Ann at Fort George, that's probably the closest that I've come to that where you realize that you know she sees that tunnel at the back of Fort George does not exist in her timeline.
Right, right,
But as you were saying, it's what I get is the same as you, except my technique comes through our paranormal scientific
right,
equipment
right,
rather than myself having any kind of abilities. It comes through technology.
right,
Um, Again, it comes down to okay, my shirt gets pulled, et cetera, et cetera. Do they see what is in our world? And it's interesting that you mentioned the bookshelf because there was an experience we had a few years back with one of our adopted
uh-huh.
family ghosts here
Any friends?
that again he wanted to just let us know he was here, wanted to say hi. And the way he did that was he pulled one of these books off the shelf, boom, threw it halfway across the room.
Right,
And yeah, we just looked and it was like we didn't actually see it happen because we were actually watching television at the time, um, which is at the other end of the room. So obviously we didn't see behind us at the bookshelf.
right.
And but we heard it and we both turned and looked. And it's like, what on earth was that? And we walked over and yep, here's this book lying on the floor that there's no way that it's just going to drop off the shelf and go halfway across the room. It had to physically be thrown.
Right. And see, and that kind of gives you maybe they do have the ability to interact within our own timeline.
Yeah.
I know, like, I have experienced those kinds of things myself, right? Like, you go somewhere, you have some sort of, there's stone thrown at you, or and so there's
Hmm.
some sort of physicality that they clearly are able to perhaps interact with our current timeline, but it's, I mean, we're not going to know, right? We're
Yeah.
never.
Is it just a moment that they can connect, or it's one of the unknown? It's one of the unknown mysteries.
It is. And I mean,
Do they
that's,
see it all the time? Do they only see it for a brief moment when they want to throw a book off the shelf? It,
yeah,
who
I
knows?
mean,
That
honestly, we're not going to be able to answer that
yeah.
question. Science can't even answer that question at this point, right? It's just there's feelings that make me feel like maybe some have more of an energy signature than others. And, we could kind of divide that up in, like even a poltergeist, right? Because let's just use a poltergeist as an example, because they can, for the most part, they are the ones that are known to be able to physically manifest their energy enough to move objects in our present timeline.
Hmm.
So, what creates that? Like, what makes one spirit more powerful in terms of its energy than another? Again, don't even know where to begin with that. I mean, that is something that you can't really test, right? It's like, how do you even begin to think of those
My
things? I mean,
my head hurts even thinking about it.
well, sometimes there's just things that we don't know. And I love science. I'm a science person. I love my science. But at the same time, we know very little in terms of our own capabilities. We know very little in terms of, I mean, there's a lot of people doing work in physics and energy signatures and all of those things. But you know, let's be honest here. We can go back 1,000 years, a few thousand years. We can go back to Greek philosophers and Greek scientists and Chinese scientists and philosophers. And even then, they were talking about this stuff, right? So it's kind of the thought of, it's been going on a really, really long time, but I don't think anybody's been able to definitively say yes or
No,
no, scientifically or otherwise at this point.
no. But you know, I wish there was some kind of a paranormal library put
Yeah,
together,
it
because
would
you've got
be.
all these paranormal groups, you've got people like yourself who are sensitive. We are slowly gathering information, but the problem is that at least in the
Everybody hoards
paranormal world,
information,
that everybody has got such egos that, oh well,
yes.
my evidence is better than your evidence. It's like we're never going to get the answers until you drop the egos and we pool all this information that we've all been gathering slowly over the years into some kind of a central paranormal library.
Right, right. And I think, you know, like I know even with some of the things that I've done, it's pissed off some, you know, other paranormal investigators or people who consider, you know, and here's the thing. I mean, I take what and this is it. I take what I do. You know, this is not a job. This is not a, you know, I'm not getting paid for any of this stuff, right? This is personal experience. I love to interact. And I, like I said, I like having people out to do these things. So I know I've been lambasted numerous times online by people who are like, I don't understand why you do public investigations and how that you can even get information and you can't, because you can't control the environment and you can't do all this. And I'm like, yeah, but you can. You just have to set out the ground rules for people. They're
Right.
first time people. Somebody, you know, people have to learn somewhere. So if I can offer them a situation where they can come into a controlled environment, this is not just willy-nilly. We're not just letting everybody do whatever they want and run rampant through a building. It's pretty controlled. We usually break it into groups so that it's manageable. And we have several people, whether it's someone like yourself who's really great with equipment, or several intuitives, mediums, and someone with equipment. We break it into groups and we make it manageable, and we pick certain areas of buildings and we go there and we spend, you know, 2 hours in one spot. And 2 hours is nothing. I mean, sometimes you can get absolutely not a single thing in 2 hours,
Mhm.
but we do that. And then we switch places in the building. So we go around and we do this and we overlap. And then we come back. And at the end of the night, we'll spend an hour or 2 hours going over what everyone's experiences were. And then we talk about that. And I think that that's valuable information, because just because someone isn't experienced with using a K2, or you know, maybe their abilities are just something that they're just understanding and starting to tune into, these kinds of situations give people opportunity, but it also gives us as people who are involved in paranormal investigation or paranormal, you know, circumstances, a broader brush, you know, to work with. It kind of baffles me when people get into these little cliques and they, you know, they got these little cliques and they're like, oh, they don't want to share their information, or they get jealous because, you know, somebody else
Exactly.
is doing something similar to them, you know. And
Exactly.
I see this all the
Yeah.
time. Like I've seen people cut me off on Facebook because I write books, and I write books about the paranormal, and I write kids books about the paranormal. And then, you know, they might be doing the same thing. And it seems like it's at cross purposes, because now, you know, my book's out there and their book's out there, and maybe their book won't get read because and it's like, you know what? That's really petty. And it's just, you know what, we are both experiencing the same things, so let's share that. Let's promote each other. Let's give people opportunities